But Freud invented a new subject called psychoanalysis, in which he tried to explain the cause of illness from a psychological perspective. I think which is much more interesting and which is much more important, and not because it was new, but I think because it kind of give you kind of the deeper understanding. It kind of gives you the kinds of explanation which is profound, not only in terms of some kind of existential level, but also it gives you practical psychoanalytic tools and a set of rules through which we can actually understand why why our bodies become sick. Now, first of all, we need to understand that there are three different things in our mind. One is ego, other one is the id. Id is the instinctual unconscious. According to Freud, id is the instinctual unconscious, and ego is the waking state in which we do different stuff in our everyday life. We just go to college, universities, and we just do our everyday task basically. This ego part of ourselves is the waking part of ourselves who make the decisions, who develop different kinds of behavioral patterns, who responds and initiate into human interactions. And then there is something in this ego which is separate, a kind of a different agency from the ego, that we call superego. Now, superego is somehow tied, or it is somehow in touch or in contact with the external world. Superego knows very well how the external world functions. It is the agency of our moral values, it is the agency of social norms and all different kinds of rules and regulation of the external reality. On the other hand, id, the instinctual unconscious, is the evil. It is the animal part of ourselves. It is the part of ourselves who has no clue of the world, who don't want to know about the world, who exist only to satisfy itself. For example, extreme sexual desire or sexual craving, or for example, sometimes we occasionally feel extremely angry. Out of rage we throw things and objects. Yes, we cannot control ourselves. It is as if that some other force has somehow hijacked our body and mind and our soul, and we are doing things because we are in the spell of that force. Now this force is the id. This id don't want to follow the rules of the world, don't want to do stuff according to the norms of society and so on. On the other hand, superego is always trying to fit ourselves into the world, trying to shape us according to the demand of the external world, according to the moral values, social values and human rights and so on. For example, if you are walking on the street and you look at a beautiful lady, but if all of a sudden, and because of your libidinal force, you feel this urge to kiss that young lady, but you cannot do that because there are social norms, there are different kinds of things. It is maybe it is not ethical, it is not morally valid, and that's why you cannot do. The superego is just resisting you and just trying to trying to let you know that how you should behave in the world. On the other hand, the id, it doesn't want just to know all these things, that how the world works. It just want to just satisfy this urge. But the ego, the task of the ego is simply to balance these two different forces, or more precisely speaking, just to tie up these two forces so that they don't break from one another. The task of the ego is to maintain these two contradictory forces, to manage these two contradictory forces. And when these two different forces, the superego and the id, they break from the ego, they create kind of an unbearable conflict for the ego, then it forms different kinds of physiological symptoms. Maybe we sometimes feel pain in different parts of the body, sometimes we feel headache, sometimes there are all different kinds of things happens to our body. Now this ego is it basically develops over the course of time. When we grow up, we gradually develop this function of the ego so that we learn how to manage this superego and the id. But what happens? The conflicts are, it's extremely ordinary. We cannot avoid conflicts between the external world and the id. It is unavoidable. So the conflicts are not the main cause for the disease and the sickness of our body, but according to Freud, it is not the conflict but some form of breaking, in some form of conflict for which the ego is underdeveloped. Ego is not prepared properly. For example, let's take an example from the life of Franz Kafka. Franz Kafka, when he was 9 years old, one day he asked for a glass of water from his parents, but his parents didn't respond to him, and he was crying, and then he was asking for a glass of water again and again. His parents were not responding to him properly, and all of a sudden his father got angry, and then he got mad, and then he just took Kafka and just let him be there outside of the balcony and just lock the window of that balcony. Now Kafka, he was crying. He was not intentionally trying to disturb his parents, but what he was trying, he was looking for attention from his parents. Like all of us, when we were child, we used to do this thing. We want attention from our parents. We want kind of softness, the kind of safety we want to feel. We just want to see how they respond to us, how much they love us, how much they care for us. As Kafka was also trying to do that thing. It was like a normal thing, but his father didn't took it normally. Now Kafka's father just took Kafka and just put him outside of the balcony for the whole of the night. And it was it was winter time, and Kafka was crying, and he didn't know that what he has done wrong and why he is being punished. And this is this is the ego who was underdeveloped, and the demand of the id and the external world was not aligned, and ego didn't knew that how to tackle this kind of situation. Now it is not a conflict, but rather conflict between the external world and the id, but rather it is the underdevelopment of the ego in the face of a conflict. When we face something which is for which our ego self, our ego part is not prepared, and this unpreparedness is too much, when this conflict is too much complex, too much difficult, and the ego is too much, it is not prepared at all in any way for this conflict, then there is a break in between this external world and the id, or maybe you can say the superego and the id, and from that break different forms of disease and different kinds of physiological symptoms we begin to see. Now according to Freud, what we can do here, through analysis we can solve this puzzle, we can solve it. Through analysis we can go into unconscious, and we can just uproot all those traumatic things, all those traumatic experience we have ever experienced, and also we can develop our ego so that it can somehow manage to tackle both the forces of the superego and also the demand of the id, so that it can place the id in the different parts of the world, external world, and so that the superego can be at some level managed or reduced to some point where id can satisfy itself, so that we no need to suppress ourselves too much into our own unconscious. So I hope now you have got the points that why we become sick and so on. So thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you in the next one.